Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. Our good friend and weekly regular Phil Giraldi joins us now. Phil, thank you for coming on the show. Since last we talked, I'm hearing more and more chatter that it was more likely than not that your friends and former colleagues in the intelligence community either planned, plotted, knew about, or cheered on whatever it was that Yevgeny Prigozhin attempted to accomplish last week. But they thought, the intel people thought, it was a real coup that would be bloody and that could very well have ended up with Vladimir Putin lying on his back, either literally or metaphorically. What do you now know or now believe about Prigozhin's escapades and how legitimate or bona fide or up for show it may have been?
Well, this is really tough to sort out. The one possibility, of course, is that this was a real thing. It was a real coup that had some of the generals in on it, and possibly initiated by elements within the Ukrainian government. Taking that one step farther, could this be something that was initiated by U.S. and probably British intelligence, getting in contact with Prigozhin through his travels in Africa, where the Wagner Group is operating? So that's another possibility. And what I'm hearing from my remaining intelligence contacts right now this is of course informal. I'm not legally allowed to be briefed on these things, but you do hear things, you do talk to people.
Especially since you come on this show, no way are you legally allowed to be briefed.
Well, what I'm hearing is that the many in the intelligence community who've been examining this now believe that this is a possible deception where Putin knew all about it and he and Prigozhin teamed together to make this thing look like a real crisis from which the Putin administration could indeed come out stronger, and also use it as a wedge issue to humiliate what all the Western interpreters are saying about it, and as well as make the U.S. and British and whatever other intelligence services were involved look bad. So, there are a lot of possibilities here.
All right. So our friend and colleague, Ray McGovern, is of the view that CIA and MI6 thought it was real, that when CIA briefed the Gang of Eight, that's the Congress within the Congress, that the CIA is required to brief in advance of covert operations, they made it sound like it was something they were involved with and for which they would claim credit. A, are you hearing that? And B, I have to ask you this because whenever you put CIA and MI6 together, you seem to be giving the impression that MI6 is a little bit more aggressive than even CIA. So let's start first with, is it more likely than not that CIA thought it was real? I also hear from my former friends in the media that the ex-generals were lined up in their green rooms. They were just expecting to have a field day 2 weekends ago. That the media thought, and we know if the media thinks it, they get it from the CIA, that something terrible for Putin was going to happen. Okay, I've said enough. Take that ball and run with it, Phil.
Well, I think the fact is that some in CIA, now if CIA had been instrumental in setting this up, CIA would, of course, expect that it was real. But as I say, there's kind of a whiff in the air right now that maybe it wasn't real right from the start, that Russian intelligence was aware of this, Putin was aware of it, and he might have cut some kind of arrangement with Prigozhin. I mean, this is a really murky. I'm in a conversation with one of my former agency friends I said, this might not be just a double agent or a double cross. This could be a triple cross, depending on how many levels of people were being diddled about who was doing what to who.
Explain to us, before you get to your views of MI6, explain to us how a triple cross would work.
Well, Prigozhin might have been lying to everyone, which means he's lying to the Russians, he's lying to the CIA, and he's lying to his own people. That's a triple cross.
Is there any way that Prigozhin could have communicated with CIA and MI6, and Russian intelligence would not have known about it?
Yeah, I mean, as I suggested a little earlier, he could have been set up on one of his trips to Africa.
Well, if he's in Africa and he's talking to a CIA agent, wouldn't the Russians know about it?
Not necessarily. It depends how tightly he was being surveilled, tightly he was being watched. And once he were in contact with CIA or MI6 or even Ukrainian intelligence, they would give him a secure communication system, which would be probably satellite based, that he would use to stay in touch with them and make arrangements. So there's, as I say, there's so many possibilities here. It's quite incredible. Have you seen the story that Prigozhin apparently appeared in St. Petersburg?
No. When did he appear in St. Petersburg?
Yesterday. This appeared today. Apparently, he went to the intelligence headquarters in St. Petersburg to pick up his weapons. The guy's house was apparently searched after he was detained, and they picked up all his weapons, and they even identified all the weapons. He had a little arsenal. And so he picked up his weapons and then went back to Belarus. So, I mean, there's just some crazy stuff. If it's true, how does all this happen? I mean, this guy was described as a terrorist, and he was leading an insurrection against the legitimate government in Russia. And somehow a deal was cut where he was exiled to Belarus. And now all of a sudden he's in St. Petersburg. If this story is true, it's incredible.
I haven't seen that in any of the mainstream press. This is the first I've heard of it. You would think that this would be breaking news for the New York Times and CNN and Fox and the Wall Street Journal and everybody else.
Yeah, look at it. I know Yahoo is reporting it. You'll find it there.
All right. Let's switch gears. Oh, let me ask you about MI6. Is MI6 generally more aggressive, generally more inclined to stick its nose into the business of other governments than CIA?
I don't think it's quite that simple. I think the explanation why MI6 does a lot of the running in terms of these joint intelligence operations is the fact that MI6 has basically a different type of cadre. Their officers tend to stay in one place for a long time. They go native. They learn the language. They learn the culture. They make tons of contacts. So they're usually the ones that have a little bit better mechanism to get at some of these people they want to get at.
Whereas the CIA, moves people around every how many years?
Well, it depends, but 4 years is about as long as a CIA officer will ever stay in one place. And then you're off to another culture, another language, that's more the pattern with the CIA.
The current director of the CIA, William Burns, gave a speech over the 4th of July holiday in which he said now is the best time in a generation to recruit Russian intelligence agents to work for the United States. Our friend Larry Johnson, who will be on with me later today, exploded at the naivete of this. Do you agree with Larry? Can you tell us what you think Burns was talking about, and how difficult is it to persuade an intelligence agent professional, whether it's KGB, GRU, FSB, whatever they call themselves, essentially to commit treason right under his boss's nose?
Well, the first thing I would point out is that the director of CIA has never recruited anyone. He's never worked in the business, really. So what he's saying is something that somebody's put in his head. During the Cold War, to be sure, where Russia and the Soviet Union represented something in particular that many people had problems with. It was always possible, or sometimes possible, to find a Russian official who, for ethical reasons or for reasons of he disapproved of his government, who might cooperate with you. That's no longer the case. So it's basically now these are fishing expeditions. This ad has been out for quite some time, actually, trying to get it's a public ad trying to convince Russians to betray their country. From what I hear, they've had no success with it, although a lot of people have gone to it to look at it for entertainment. And I would say it's very difficult, probably, to get a Russian agent based on the differences between their culture and society and our culture and society. The only motivation that would appeal to some of them would be money.
Okay. Over the weekend, President Zelenskyy made a rather startling statement. We'll play it for you now with a very nice British accent.
Now we have information from our intelligence that the Russian troops have placed objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario. But in any case, the world can't but see, that the only source of danger to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else.
The only source of danger to the nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else. Why in God's name would he think he can persuade the world that Russia would blow up a nuclear power plant when it is more likely than not that he would do so just in time for the NATO meeting in Vilnius?
Absolutely, you nailed it. This is basically something that's inviting an escalation. And if he can't do an escalation one way, he's going to do it another way. He's going to be, firing probably a couple of those nice shiny new missiles that NATO has been providing him with at the facility, and he would be the one attempting to blow it up. Barring that, he's just hoping that somebody does something really stupid, and goes along at the meeting in Vilnius and gives him all the assistance and money that he wants.
So Reuters and CNN are reporting that experts from the UN nuclear watchdog, that's the group that our friend Scott Ritter once headed, no longer, at the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, have yet to observe any indications of mines or explosions at the plant. But of course, they're asking for more access and more time to look. What would be his motivation for this false flag, to force NATO to enter the war with troops on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what he wants. I mean, you've probably noted, as many of my other friends have, that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has gone nowhere. And so this was his ace in a hole, in a way, to try to show some success on the ground to get NATO directly involved in support of him. Since that hasn't worked, now he has to come up with other schemes. And I think that's the long and the short of it. This guy desperately wants NATO to enter the war on his behalf, and he will do anything to bring that about.
Man, I would think, let's just be rational about this. If he wants NATO to agree at Vilnius in 7 days on July 11, I don't know how long their meeting is going to be. I assume it's more than 1 day. He would have to attack that plant pretty soon, because you want fallout, figuratively and literally, from this attack to motivate NATO. You don't want this to happen while NATO is at Vilnius. Our friend Ray McGovern reports, again below the radar, and from his friends, who I think are also your friends in the intelligence community, that there is serious concern that if Vladimir Putin, you tell me what you think of this logic, believes that Zelenskyy will attack the nuclear power plant, he might attack something else first, and it might be on this side of the Atlantic.
I don't see that, because I think Putin is too careful a player to escalate to that extent. I rather think that, and this is just a guess on my part, that if I were Putin and I were sensing that Zelensky were about to do something as catastrophic as this, I might just take Zelensky out.
Very interesting. What is your view on what's happening in France right now? We can show you some clips. When I first saw the videos that we'll show you in a second, I thought this was Ukraine after Russia had bombed it. Chris, can you run those videos, please? Provoked and extensive. I wonder if anybody's intelligence community has anything to do with it or could stop it.
I don't know. I saw those videos over the past couple of days, and I was astonished. I mean, this was like war in the streets, and I don't know to what extent you've.
Let me just interrupt you for a moment, Alistair, because when I first saw this clip that we're running now, I thought, okay, that was me with Alistair Crook earlier today, basically saying the same I said to you now. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent you've seen the banlieues, the suburbs of the French cities, where the largely North African workers are housed, but they're ghastly. I mean, this is like prison camps. Heavily policed. The police respond with a heavy hand, because obviously the situation in these places it breeds a lot of discontent, and there's no solution there. These people were brought in essentially as workers. Their needs, other than that, are not basically conceded or heeded to, and it's just been a dreadful situation that's only going to get worse. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Colonel McGovern has opined that Macron will not serve out his full 6-year term, to which he was just reelected. President Putin obviously has a different view. Here's President Putin with an English translator talking about a recent meeting he had with French President Macron. No, we don't have it. Okay, I thought we did. I thought we did have President Zelensky talking about President Macron. Would the intelligence community?
I wish you health, dear Ukrainians. I have just finished a conversation with Mr. President of France, Macron, and these are the third international negotiations today, after conversations with the NATO Secretary General and the Prime Minister of Sweden. The key is our defense, the front line, weapons and the capabilities of our soldiers, and I'm grateful to our partners for understanding our needs. We have agreed on new defense packages, and by the way, thank you, Emmanuel, for the fact that today the weapons we had agreed on, missiles and tanks, have begun to arrive.
Thank you, and he refers to him by his first name, Emanuele, that the weapons we agreed on, 1,000 tanks, have begun to arrive. These are French tanks that he's persuaded the French people. Obviously, the president of France has had his arm twisted by Joe Biden. How much longer is this going on, Phil?
Well, it's going to go on as long as Zelensky can keep playing the game. That's why it's so vital for him to keep escalating what's going on. I mean, these French tanks are light tanks that they'll be destroyed upon arrival by the Russians. This whole thing is absurd. I mean, people are beginning to raise the question of why are we there at all? And this is the question that should have been raised before we got in there. This is ghastly. People are dying for nothing, And there is no reason why the United States or NATO or anybody else should be involved in this.
Do members of the intel community raise these questions with their superiors? Does Joe Biden know that there are CIA agents on the ground in Ukraine who believe that they and the rest of their American colleagues shouldn't be there?
I don't think Joe Biden is aware of much, but the fact is there are certainly people in the system that are quite aware of this stuff. I remember, when the Iraq War took place, when I was still in the agency, there was a lot of dissent at working levels about what this all meant. People knew the intelligence was phony. And the same thinking, the same talking is going on now. But it comes down to the usual equation, which is that if you want to retain your job and get promoted, you keep your mouth shut.
Phil Giraldi, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you very much for joining us. Tony Schaefer at 4 o'clock, Larry Johnson at 4:45, and as always, no matter what it is, more as we get it. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.